Okay, well, Mayor, I want to open up by getting your thoughts on, there was quite the discussion this past Monday about no firearms signs. And it was an agenda item, basically asking for the council's discretion, discuss City Hall policy regarding posting no firearms signs at City Hall. Just maybe take us through the discussion and where did they leave the issue? And I guess, what did you hear? What was your take on it?
It was a very spirited conversation. You know, there's an argument that can be made. There was a citizen who, and we appreciated him saying, do you need to have that sign out front that says concealed carry people can't carry their weapons? Signs, because he thinks, and many people do think that if there's a sign there, people that are going to go around who would consider doing something horrible will go somewhere where there are not firearms. And so it was previously in our code that we have this sign out that guns could not be allowed in here. And the argument that was made is for people that are, you know, that do have concealed carry, that go through a background check, that do have the ability to carry a weapon, that he feels that they should be able to come into the building like this, following all the same rules and regulations, just to carry the weapon. It is concealed carry. And so that the only thing that the citizen brought up, and we're very happy that he did, is just take the sign down. He's not asking us to do anything else other than that, so that it doesn't look like you're coming into a area where somebody that wants to do something evil would feel like they could in that room. There was a very spirited debate against, I guess you could say, people that are really anti-gun to people that are very pro-gun. The anti-gun movement is like, do we really need more firearms in the building during a meeting there, or just to come into the public? Is somebody having a concealed weapon going to be able to solve that issue? And there were the other, very strong arguments that, yes, if a bad person doesn't know where somebody carrying a weapon is, they're going to think twice. Is hopefully what it would be. So basically, I believe what we're going to do is we're going to do more research on this. It'll be coming back up. Since then, Chief Gramza has sent information to the council on information on these big events, and as well, the Marshfield PD has a discussion board going on Marshfield PD on their Facebook page, and there are many people commenting there. So again, I go back to this gentleman that brought this up, brought up good information, and he actually said that in certain settings he feels unsafe, and having a concealed weapon he feels safer. And so that is but where this leads is to more discussion. And I believe, it's my personal belief, that if you have this group over here that's anti everything to do with it, and this group over here that is it's okay to have guns, and maybe even it's okay to have guns, I think what we need to do is have a civil discussion, take the emotion out of it, and just have a discussion on the facts. Because realistically, what we're talking about is a 5x7 sign. And so I am looking forward to the discussion, because I do appreciate both sides. And you know what's really sad is these are discussions that we have to have in today's world, because you never know who is going to walk in and who is going to do an act of evil. You know, when I was a kid, 100 years ago, out in California, we had earthquake drills.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that's what we worried about. Now, our children are going through active shooter drills.
Yeah.
So this is a conversation that needs to take place. I think it's a good one. I'm hopeful, and that the next meeting that we have, we're going to keep it to the facts, because at the end of the day, we are talking about one sign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One sign.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. First of all, I mean, I think it's one of these things that, like Mayor said, we need to keep the emotion out. Both sides want safety, and the question is, what promotes the most safety? Some people believe it promotes the most safety to have no weapons in this building, and that's the most safe thing we can put out there and enforce. Others believe that since the world doesn't always operate that way, it's the most safe if people are able to protect themselves and maybe take out somebody who comes in here to do harm. But everyone's got the best interest at heart. With that said, going back to kind of play off this a little bit, you know, if we want to enforce no firearms or weapons in this building, we have to have the signs at the entrances. The signs must be posted 5 by 7 at the entrances. So if we don't have signs, then we forfeit the right to you know, tell someone they're doing wrong when they walk in the building. That's the real thing. And I know the concern raised by some, and as mentioned earlier, bad guys don't read the signs. They come in to do harm, they're not reading the signs, and law-abiding citizens do. I guess that's what the council has to wrestle with. What's the greater good at this point? To try and keep all weapons out of this building, or to give people a chance to defend themselves from someone who might come in here to do harm. And one other point to mention, Tom Witzel had to leave during the meeting, and we did not have the council seat District 7 filled, which we might talk about here later. So with 2 people down, I think that it was a good idea. Don't have a conversation like this that looks like it might be divided without having 2 people to weigh in. So it was delayed until the November 12th meeting. And there will be more work done between now and then to kind of frame the issue.
Okay. You have anything on that? Well, was there anything else on that before we move on? Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, so Mayor, you used a term that caught my attention about, you know, this is the world we live in. We're having these kinds of discussions now. I guess the other world we live in is the e-cigarette and vaping world. You know, you didn't have those, you know, 100 years ago either when you were a kid.
No.
And thank you for reminding me.
And but now we do. So here's this world of e-cigarettes and vaping, and I guess there was quite a, I don't know if it was not really a discussion, it was more of a presentation. You got some information the council did on Tuesday about e-cigarettes and vaping, and then there was this whole separate, I guess, agenda item about smoking in parks, prohibiting smoking in any city park was another, I guess, presentation, because that was a first reading of an ordinance that didn't really call for a vote. Neither of these issues or agenda items did. They were just for, I guess, informational purposes. So talk about them, what you heard, the e-cigarette vaping issue, the smoking in park thing. A lot of talk Monday night about that issue. What did you hear? And I guess where are these issues going now in terms of city council?
So just narrow it down to those issues.
Yeah, right. Painting with a broad brush here.
As far as the Juul and the vaping and those, that was more or less an educational thing. And it is scary because if you look at those, they're not regulated as much as they should be. Because you can get all kinds of contaminants in there. Many times people do those vaping things, and there's all kinds of stuff thrown in there. THC is thrown in there, all kinds of stuff. People can do really, really bad things with that. And then the unsuspecting kid or adult can then take this, and it could have very negative effects. Nationally, we're seeing an epidemic of people having very severe reactions to that. So I believe, I believe that was good. The presentation that was done was also very enlightening on the games that are being played with these Juul things. I mean, you saw some of the games that these kids are doing with this and how much they're taking in. That's not the way vaping was intended to take place, where you just go and I think originally it was intended to kind of be in, like, help you get off of cigarettes, I think was the original intention. Now the things that these kids are doing with it it's scary. And it's another thing now that parents have to worry about. They have to worry about their kids on social media and what they're doing. And now this vaping, thing with the games that are being played, it's a very, very scary thing. So I believe that there will be more on that coming down the road. Now, alongside of that, we did discuss smoking in the parks. And so you really have to separate the two, because on one hand, the juuling and the vaping we're considering it's epidemic. I believe it's going to get somewhere in the next year or two to where there's going to be some pretty heavy regulations on this. I remember, not 100 years ago, but 90 years ago when I was a paramedic, the biggest thing we worried about at the time, and a lot of people say, well, marijuana is no big deal. And I will tell you, back on the street, this is, back in the early 80s, the argument was exactly the same. The problem is you don't know what that joint is laced with. And so that with the juuling is a very, very big thing. Now, smoking in a park is a completely different, it's a completely different conversation. Because now with smoking cigarettes, the argument that was made is that there are people that do call and complain that there are people that are smoking. You can't smoke in a restaurant and different things like this. So we do get those calls. And there are people that, they're going to the park, they're being out in the open, and then somebody is smoking. We don't want to vilify people that smoke, because we can't just be in a world, even though the world wants to go there, where if you do this, you're vilified. If you do this, you're vilified. We don't want to go there. The other side of that is the person going there maybe that doesn't smoke is their use and enjoyment. So there was one thing about, that people should smoke out in the parking lot. Well, if you're at a park and you're in the parking lot, then in essence you could smoke in the parking lot, but you can't now because it's a park. The thing that's very, very hard for the city council, what many of them that are more of a libertarian, I guess, kind of background is, how do you tell somebody you can't use a legal product? The product is legal to use, so how do you put that kind of restriction? So they're going to come back again. That's going to be coming back. There's going to be more, because I forget who brought it up, but somebody has to say, if you're going to make a regulation like that, you have to prove that secondhand. You have to have proof that secondhand smoke will harm somebody, and so that's going to be coming back. But they were two very spirited. Well, the vaping one was just, I think, eye-opening for a lot of people, myself included. The smoking one was a much harder one to do. Whether you do or don't like smoking, there is a right to use a legal product, and that's the conversation.
Yeah, I agree with all of what the mayor said. I would add to Bob's comments that a couple things. First of all, it was very informational, which is good for not only the council and the people in the audience, but the people at home, as they see what's going on with their kids and their grandkids and those types of things. But beyond that, I think the question becomes, what is a public policy issue, and then within that, what's a city issue? And I think the framing of this is going to be, what is a city issue in terms of impact on others? Secondhand smoke, those types of things have a health impact on those around. There may be an issue with vaping in general that is harming people and causing all these other problems that may be a problem for the user, but maybe it doesn't have a direct impact all the time on others. That's where smoking in the parks comes in. The idea we prohibited this in public buildings before is that if you're smoking and I'm 3 feet away in this building, it's affecting me. If you're smoking and you're standing in the middle of Greasy Park, you know, it's less direct that you're, you know, impacting people around you. So at some level, we need to rein it in to not only is it a public policy issue, but is it a local government, city, if you will, public policy issue. Right now, we do include e-cigarettes and vaping in our current ordinance, referring to those types of electronic delivery devices. And I think the point they made is continue that, pursue that right along with smoking every step of the way. When you extend the smoking regulations farther out, make sure that e-cigarettes and vaping are part of it because they have that same impact on surrounding people. But as far as the specific impact on users, we've heard a lot of stories about the lungs of people who have gotten involved in this. That's where we might have to say, well, it's a public health issue, but is it a city government issue? And the answer to that portion may be no ultimately. But as Bob said, we're getting information from others. We're trying to get a sense of how we can demonstrate that there is enough secondhand impact to impose further regulations if we want to do that here in the city.
So with the vaping, the city of Stevens Point about a month ago enacted an ordinance for kids under 21 that they can't vape. Now, obviously, that they presented that there's a problem here too. Is that something you might consider entertaining an ordinance?
It's something that we haven't yet. With the information that we have, the Marshfield Area Coalition of Youth has been tremendous. They have a lot of information for us. And that is something, I believe with the information that we saw the other night, I'm not going to be surprised if that comes up soon.
Yeah, I think that is perhaps one of the things that the council could look at is extending that 21-year limit to e-cigarettes and vaping too. I think when vaping first came out, and this is one of the things that Jenna Flynn presented the other night, it was thought of as kind of a fun thing. Oh, it's blueberry, it's, you know, hazelnut cream, whatever these different flavors are and smells are, like a harmless alternative to smoking. I think what we're finding out is it's not necessarily a harmless alternative to smoking. At that point, you look at whether or not it's appropriate for younger people to have direct access to those products. So I guess I haven't seen the Stevens Point ordinance, but I mean, that is a possibility if the council would like to look at that in the future, whether they want to extend that legal limit to those types of products.
And it would just be, so I think that, you know, Jenna was asking you to, I think she made mention of the fact that Wood County has updated its, I think it's clean indoor air policy. And so they're asking, is that basically what their ask was? They made a presentation, but didn't they have an ask saying Marshfield has not updated its policy to include, you know, e-cigarettes and vaping? And are they, is that what they're asking, Steve, essentially?
You know, I need to look back at the tape of that meeting. I believe that Jenna had 4 things that the city could tangibly do. And I'm glad she did that. A lot of times people make presentations and then they walk away and the mayor and the council and staff look at each other and say, what tangible things can we do to make things better? But I do believe that was one of the things that she said, are we in compliance with the Clean Indoor Air Act? I mean, we have, for our buildings and facilities, we have outlawed vaping and e-cigarettes along with cigarette smoke. But perhaps she's talking about going farther than that. So we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at all the ideas that they brought up. And like I said, I'm glad that she gave us some tangible suggestions of things we could think about if we wanted to. What's within the city's purview?
Okay, so just to clarify, there are no, you can't use e-cigarettes or you can't vape indoors?
In city facilities.
In city
That's
facilities
city
in
policy.
Marshfield.
That's
okay.
city policy, as opposed to the policy, the ordinance that talks about restaurants and whatever else.
Oh, I see.
But within city-owned facilities, e-cigarettes and vaping are treated the same as cigarettes, I believe.
Okay.
Beyond our buildings that we control, I think that is one of the issues. Could it be extended to cover those facilities? We have a lot to look at. We do, and I think we want to be on top of this. Bob mentioned the fact that some people identify as libertarians and say, really, is it our role to be stepping into these waters? But we'll look at all the things that Jenna brought up.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Oh. Okay, Mayor, you got a new alderman the other night.
Mm-hmm.
just talk about that process and the fact that, well, we should also mention, I think the reason why the council kind of, well, didn't they suspend the rules to vote on this right away on Monday versus
Yes.
waiting, was because right before the regular council meeting, there was a budget meeting. And so the city, or the council, I think there was some thought given to this idea that maybe the folks in District 7 should get some representation as quickly as they can during this ongoing budget process, maybe to summarize that discussion, I guess, and the fact that there is now going to be a new representative in District 7, right?
Yep, just as a little history, it was, we received a very sudden resignation from District 7 with Jason Zaleski, who was in that. His term was going to be up this year anyway, and his and he felt that he needed to step down immediately. And this was, we thank him for the years of service that he has, but you know, what we were concerned with, there's nothing saying that the seat has to be filled. Many of us thought that District 7 has to have a representative. Obviously, anybody from District 7 can come to a public meeting, but we wanted them to be there. So within just a short period of getting Jason's resignation, we put that out there, and then Adam Fisher and Ardell Klein came forward. Two people, and I think we had it out for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Ardell's just came in the very last hours of the open time frame. And they both sent in letters. They both presented at the council for a couple minutes, and then it was decided to suspend the rules because otherwise they would have waited till the next council meeting. And we want to get all the budget and finance information to them so they can be an active part of the next the continuing budget talks that are taking place. And so a vote of 7-2, Adam Fisher was appointed, and he will, his swearing in should be soon.
Yeah, what's going to happen now is Deb Hall, our city clerk, will be swearing him in between Monday's meeting and the next meeting on October 29th. That can be done in a private type of brief ceremony, if you will, here at City Hall. That way he'll be able to start the meeting on the 29th and take a seat as anybody else on the council would. Let me add to that, you know, Adam, you probably saw his resume in the packet. He obviously has experience in government. He, with the county board and some other areas, even his time with the Central Wisconsin State Fair as executive director, he's interacted with the city in a variety of ways. So he does come in with more beginning experience than a lot of people do. We'll still do an orientation for him. Right now, Amy Krogman, our administrative specialist, is setting up times for all department heads to meet with him, to give them an overview of what we do, answer questions about their departments, and to help him hit the ground running when he steps on, you know, into the limelight here. You know, it's good, I guess. I'm not saying I'm favor him over anybody else. I want whoever wants to be the best council person to be that person. But in this case, he may need a little bit less orientation to what we do than somebody with no background at all.
So then before the council meeting, there was a budget meeting. And is that just start the process, Mayor, or what was that meeting about? What did it cover, and what's the next step in that process?
So yeah, it was a very good meeting. It was a constructive meeting. We got through several of the, we got through the general government, public works, public safety, and we ended up at Parks and Rec. So we still have a few more economic development and special revenues to go, and there's more to do. The amount of work that went into putting this budget together was enormous, and I've got two thoughts, but I'll come back to what those were. So there'll be another meeting on the 29th, and then again, if we don't get through everything, then again the following month on the 4th.
November 4th, yeah.
And then it would be public posted, and then we can adopt it at a public hearing. And so we're looking forward to that. But this process is long, it's detailed. You have the normal budget, the city administrator's recommended budget, and then you also have supplemental pages that go on that, I mean, just down to the penny. So it really is, it's extensive. My feelings on the budget, it's almost like I have two personalities with it. There's one which I'm incredibly proud of the work that Steve, City Administrator, Ron Alman, Finance Director, all city staff, and Amy Krogman was very helpful in putting this together. You know, they had to somehow work a $1.8 million deficit down as far as they could, and they got it basically down to through cuts, through refinancing and everything else. Basically, we're able to cut out about $1.5 million of that shortfall and get it to where we are about 3% or 300,000 short, if you will. And so that, in that, the request is, or the recommendation is, to do a 2% tax hike, which would take our, to go up from 929 to 945 per thousand. Now, still dramatically lower than our three biggest neighbors in Rapids, Point, and Wausau. And so from that aspect, with, you know, when you go from 1.8 and you whittle it down to 300,000, that in and of itself is incredibly impressive. And that's the one side. The other side is being a taxpayer, and the fact that city staff had to be put through that. There are still a lot of, I don't know what the right word is, angry feelings for the fact of, first of all, I can only imagine what would have happened if we didn't have this budget shortfall, where that would be. But because of, and this is the part of government I refuse to get used to. I refuse. I call it a mistake when and now here's the thing. How did we get to the budget shortfall? And I won't go on too long because I know we've had this conversation since February. There was a mistake in the accounting method. They weren't, for years, this wasn't just one thing, and it got buried so deep that it didn't even look that way, but it was a mistake. Because if it's not a mistake, then you don't run short. And what was happening was there wasn't enough money coming over or paying the TIDs. And so that made it look like there was a little bit more money in the general fund, and with that little bit more money in general fund, because the TIDs aren't paying their total obligation, now all of a sudden you don't have to raise taxes all those years because the amount in there, you're okay. Well, it was wrong. And so now what the citizens of Marshfield are forced to do is make up for a 6, 7, 8, 9 year, what I call a mistake. Now, the good thing about this mistake is there was not one penny left. There was no embezzlement or there was no wrongdoing or anything like that. And that's a big thing. But the issue is, it was a mistake. And I will always call it a mistake. And that part of me is not real happy, because now the citizens of Marshfield are the ones, in essence, that have to, you can't say it any other way, clean this up. Now, realistically, if the numbers would have been right all along, then you would have had little 3 or 4 or 5 cent increases over the last 6 or 7 years, and then you wouldn't have this dramatic jump. I think it's 18 cents. Now, it's 18 cents, you know, for a lot of people, that's not a lot. But for some people on fixed income, they're going to feel it. So those are the two different personalities. But at the end of the day, we can't worry about that too much, the second personality, because we are where we are. And I believe that the work that Steve and everybody did is tremendous. And now we have to go forward. I will tell you this. I am going to be bringing this up at a meeting, because our debt, our savings account, if you will, is down to 11%, and that should be higher. Now, we've taken every hit possible. And this year, going to our savings account, we're only getting, last year we had budgeted $750,000 from the saving account, and I know I'm saying this wrong, so Steve will correct
Yeah,
it.
it's fair. That's right.
And this year, we're only taking $350,000 out. We are going to have the discussion of, what if we just go to that savings that's already been hit, bring that in, what will that be? Or is this at 945, do we need that for future budgets to be corrected? So that part is a work in progress. But overall, with the budget, I'm very happy with it. I'm not excited about the tax increase, but I will say this. It's not a tax increase because we're just going out frivolously spending. It's a tax increase because we're now doing the finances right, and we have to catch up. And for that, I think we'll have to absorb it.
Yeah, just adding to it, what Bob said, maybe a few things. First of all, you know, what we found ourselves in when we realized the structural budget deficit left over from the TID transfer issue we dealt with earlier in the year, we recognized right away there was no silver bullet. And I always like to go back to household world. I'm going to do that again for a second. If you and your spouse suddenly found out that you were, you know, in a big financial pickle, you'd say, well, okay, what can we do? Well, I can get a part-time job. Well, that'll help. We could refinance our mortgage for a lower monthly payment. That'll help. You know, we could cut back on some of our expenses. We won't do any traveling this summer. That would help. When you have a big thing you're facing, it's multi-purpose. It's multi-part. There isn't that one thing you can do that makes everything great. And so I think in the last 9 months, we've done a lot of that. Ron Allman, our finance director, has been outstanding. Others have been working with them to refinance our debt, to allocate monies more appropriately to where they belong in terms of collecting money from our TIDs that is administrative overhead for what we put into this. Financing internally projects instead of going out and getting loans for them, so that when the interest payments come back in to the general fund, we get to keep that instead of giving it to a bank or to some investors. So we've looked at every expense we can cut and trim. We've looked at holding the line on overtime, trying to minimize the amount of overtime our departments incur. But they're all pieces of a bigger puzzle. And I think if you told me that we could get to the end of this budget preparation time and hand off a budget to the council that had a tax rate increase of 2%, I would have been thrilled a number of months ago. I was hoping that 1 to 2% in there was possible because we were facing such a gigantic hill. And this hill that we're climbing, we're still climbing it. It's going to be over 3, 4, 5 years to get to where we want to and be in a firmer position going forward. But you're going to see that 11% increase every year. You're going to see the debt, you know, continue to be reined in. And we're spending on the pool in 2020. That's a big one-time hit. But otherwise, you know, our plans of, you know, paying off more in principal than we incur in new debt and continuing to erode that over time are going to be fully in place. And our 5-year financial plan that we're still working on with Ellers, that got sidetracked for a little bit because of some of the burning issues in front of us, that process is continuing as well, and we'll finish up in the coming months to give us a longer-term roadmap. So I don't like the tax increase any more than Bob does or anybody else does. I was hopeful that it might come in a little bit lower, and it still could. There's still things the council could say, and look, they could say, look, we want to get this down to no more than 1.5. What would that take? Well, they take some cuts, and we can try and do this for you. Do keep in mind, though, that the budget that I gave to the council last week, or earlier this week, I guess, had a 1% increase in general fund expenses. That's pretty low when you consider union contracts we don't control, the cost of supplies and equipment increasing that we don't control. I think last year our percentage for general fund increase was like 2.3%. So we've gotten it down to where, even when you talk about a 2% tax rate increase, you're talking about 1% increase in spending. The rest of it is all the gyrations we've had to do to try and make this fit. And I think that speaks well of our effort, at least, even if we haven't gotten to the exact point people would like to see in terms of the tax rate. It shows a tremendous effort to deal with a daunting situation.
You know, with that, it's interesting because our city right now is thriving. Mm-hmm. You look at how many businesses have opened up. We're looking forward to get the final tally from Mackey, but it is a lot of businesses have opened up. A lot of businesses are scheduled to go on in 2020, some very exciting ones. Many of our businesses that are already here are expanding, and our economic development from a from a real estate point of view, our real estate values have all gone up tremendously, and we're looking to do some building incentives. So all of our financial our debt is in line. We did spend a little bit more this year, put more into the budget for the pool.
Right.
And again, that is something that, I believe that we need. And even with that, we're still in good shape from how much debt and then debt service we carry with that. So the full picture is it's a very, very bright picture in the city right now. It just, no one likes taxes, but I do think here, when we get caught up, and we're getting caught up right, the amount of work that Steve has done is unbelievable, and what they've been able to accomplish is really, really incredible.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. The staff really does work hard, and we're grateful to be able to work with a good mayor and council to help get this to the finish line. I will say one more thing, and it's not to complain about the state. I think some of my peers have complained about levy limits for a long time. It's good to go to conferences and just spout off. But it is true that the equalized value of property in the city has gone up 8.4% in the last year, and the assessed value is slightly over 5%. And we're only allowed to actually collect a very small portion of that. Again, I'm not into collecting more money from our citizens than we should, or from more property owners than we should. But the fact of the matter is, it does put a little bit of a crimp on what the rate looks like when you're not allowed to keep up. And we have to build new roads, we have to add staff, police officers when we have growth, and these kind of things go on. And yet the state says, no, you can only collect this portion of that additional demand. So again, not whining, not complaining. I get that the state has a job to do too, but that does tie our hands in terms of what the tax collections look like and what it means to the tax rate.
Okay, so I'll just ask for a clarification, not to beat a dead horse here, but I want to come back to this just so we clarify what Bob McManus, the taxpayer, calls it a mistake. What does City Hall call it? What does the city administrator call it? What does the finance director call it with the 1.8? I mean, what happened?
I've tried to stay away from the word mistake or error, not just to be politically correct, but because I've certainly heard our auditor and others talk about this as being something else. The reality is that I believe it should have been detected as something that was out of the ordinary and flagged as such. It's like, I keep coming back to your home. I mean, if you were putting money in your savings account and your spouse was taking it from the savings account and using it for other purposes, well, nobody embezzled, nobody did anything criminal, but you thought you had money somewhere, and there should have been some warning that you didn't, that the money you thought was in a certain place for the future really wasn't there. So I get what the auditor says. I don't discount them, that money's removed, and cities can decide if they want to move it from Fund A to Fund B to Fund C and then use it for purpose D. That's all fine and dandy, but what was going on was out of the ordinary, to the point where if it had gone on for much longer, we'd be having a very different conversation than we are today. So I think it should have been flagged, and it wasn't. Again, the word mistake, the word error, I'm not concerned with that as much as I am your red flag.
I mean, it gave you a false sense of which funds had how much in them and how much left to pay off and that sort of thing.
Correct. So I know that the auditors are saying, not my job. The money was moved from here to there. That's your call, not ours. But I'd like to have seen them included in their management report, saying, look, here's something you might want to look at, because we see it, and it kind of makes us wonder where this is heading. If that note had been in one of the audit-related documents, I think we would have jumped on it. So I'm not bad-mouthing our auditors. CLA is a good firm, but that would have been really, really helpful.
Okay. You got it. Okay. I was going to ask about, I didn't see anything else on the regular agenda. I was going to ask about, was there anything that came out of closed session regarding possible litigation involving development agreement in TID number 7 or involving copyright issue? I see were the listed items on there.
Yeah, nothing we can really talk about at this point with either issue, unfortunately.
Okay.
So.
You know, I do want to clarify one point for the record, because Steve brings up some very, very good points. I believe that, you know, I have my taxes done CPA. And when I give my taxes to the CPA, they take it and they run with it doing CPA things, giving me the deductions that I am entitled to and everything else. So then once I do that and I pay for that service, I expect that CPA to do everything properly. Now, if it's delivered to the IRS and the IRS comes back and says, hey, that deduction won't work and you did this wrong, you did this wrong, I go back to the CPA and I go, how did you do this? This is kind of what took place within the within the way the finances were being done. I believe one of them said, yes, we saw it, and we did bring it to the knowledge of the person working at the time, but it didn't go anywhere else. And so from my perspective, at the bottom of the check that is given to the auditor is the city of Marshfield. You have an obligation then to notify the city of Marshfield. Now you get caught up in things. And then they said, the way you're doing, and they couldn't even say it's wrong. It blew my mind. Because I asked them point blank in a couple of meetings, is this wrong? And they say, well, we really can't say that. And I'm like, is this a suggested way to do it? No, it's not suggested because it'll lead to a lot of problems. Okay, the way I determine that is wrong. If it's going to lead to problems, then bring this up. And so again, no month, but you could see, and back when I ran for being mayor, I ran on a, look, we're going to get in, we're going to look at things, and we're going to speak English. And that's why this one is very hard for me. I can, if something is wrong and we've got to clean it up and mistake is made, okay, no big deal. But we are going to be able to go back and pinpoint this is where it was made, and it's not. It doesn't happen like that in government a lot. I don't think it's. You see this nationally all the time. Nobody can ever say they made a mistake. It's okay to make a mistake, but what you can't do, I think the public is sick of it, of when a mistake is made, we just can't say it. It's got a sugarcoat, blah, 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 blah. I'm just not into that. And here we're having to, you know, do a tax increase and everything else. I think that's, I think that part is a problem. And so this is why I think now, with the work that Steve and Ron has done, our TIDs are working tremendously. I believe we're going to be able to close one early. They're very profitable. So that shows that the work that was done on the TIDs and the analysis of them, the due diligence that was done, was very good. And so I think now, hopefully down the road, we'll be everything will be smooth sailing. Why not?
Yeah, yeah. And just to add to that, I mean, you know, we took it very seriously. We do have the same audit firm, and we had a lot of questions with them, but we actually changed financial advisors. I think we saw a little bit greater level of expectation from that firm than the auditor in this one, as they were providing us regular advice about our TIF districts, and we've now moved on. And that, again, that's not to be disparaging toward that company. They're a very good firm, but we found somebody now we feel is more strongly in our court in terms of making sure that those things are accounted for. One other thing I'll say, and it's on the agenda, I don't want to really necessarily talk about it, but there was an update of financial software that we're doing right now that our technology director walked through. That's an important thing too, because we are using software from 2007, And it does hamstring us, tie us a little bit in terms of the reports we can produce, the financial analysis that can be done, meeting the needs of staff and the mayor and council. And so as we improve this over the next couple of years, there might be people saying, well, wait a minute, you're spending a lot of money here on financial software. What about my street? Ultimately, that financial software is going to play a big role in efficiency and in helping us do our jobs a lot better than we're doing now, doing assessments and analysis and things that will help us to make better decisions. So it's not something you see. The public doesn't see our financial software, but when you get to the point of 12 or 13 years old, you're talking about a world of difference in terms of capabilities of that software to produce the desired information that will make us more effective.
And who was you changed financial advisors because of this 1.8 issue?
Yeah, we left PFM, Public
PFM.
Financial Management, and moved on to Ehlers out of the Brookfield area. And you know, they're both really good firms, but I think Ehlers really dived in when we were in trouble to help us out, and they've really shown themselves well. I know I dealt with them when I was at Ripon. They were our financial advisor, and they've shown a real sense for what we need here.
Also, there was a change in your finance director. Just before this whole 1.8 issue came to light, there was a change. The immediate past finance director left employment with the city, and then Ron Allman, the current finance director, came on board, and I guess, I don't know what, discovered this issue, or had it come to light while the immediate past finance director was with the city? In other words, is that why that person left employment with the city? Did the two issues have to do with each other in any way, shape, or form?
There's no clear indication of that. The person who left was actually looking for a position that he felt might give him more opportunity to grow. I think he felt like where he went to in Dunn County gave him that opportunity. Our new finance director started looking at some things, tried to analyze and understand the debts, including our TID debt, and noticed a couple things and ended up talking with our financial advisor and realizing that those transfers that have been made from the TIF districts were probably not done in the best way and were not going to serve us well. But there's no indication I've seen that the previous employee left for any reason directly related to this.
This was discovered, I think, back in, was it January or?
Yeah.
It was in the early part of the year. Okay. And I just remember Steve said, can you come on over for a meeting? And I came over for the meeting, and he and Ron were in there, and Steve was laying on the floor. And
Yeah.
And so it was something that Ron going through is, and if you ever have a chance to interview Ron, what a great, I mean, this guy is a financial mind. And he, with other folks that he works with, they could kind of see that something didn't seem right, and then they dove into it. So we are not making any accusations about any past employees or anything like this, because what we do know, in fairness, is that this type of thing is buried so low, a lot of people wouldn't even be able to see it.
Yeah, Keith Stry, the previous finance director, did an outstanding job in his time here, and largely he was continuing a practice that I think even began before he was the finance director of how to handle those TID transfer issues. But Ron is outstanding, as Bob said, and he began to look at this stuff, and it began to make him think. And right away, he wasn't sure if he was finding something that was concerning, so he kept digging to make sure that he was. You know, he's not from local government. He was working for the clinic before being here. But it began to occur to him that this didn't look right. He shared it with the staff of Ehlers, who was coming on board to help us at that point, and they agreed that something wasn't quite right. It wasn't going to lead us to a very good place. That if we'd gone on another 3, 4, 5 years, it was going to really start taking an even bigger toll on our finances. And so I credit him with that. He brought it to my attention. I had no knowledge of this either. We then brought it to the attention of the mayor and ultimately the council. And again, you know, we took it full on, straight on, and we've been dealing with the pieces as we can. It's not a one-size-fits-all answer. A lot of components have gotten us to a better place and will continue to get us there, and we're committed to them, absolutely.
That's all I've got.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
very much.